objectively speaking.
Talking about this, I'm fascinated about this trajectory, right? That you've gone on specifically. What changes if you were able to create what you think the world of men that are around about your age need right now in terms of influencers and influences? What do you wish that you could see more of in terms of the sort of content that's out there, in terms of the kind of messaging, the kind of values, the sorts of things that men should be aspiring toward, and the things that they should stop aspiring toward as well? What would you try and prescribe?
I think, generally speaking, like a reduction in materialism would probably be a good thing. And I think the additional emphasis on just developing like a competence in like any domain whatsoever, whether it's like pottery, exercising, working out, like whatever it is. So I think it'd be better to shine more of a light on people's genuine like ability and attainments and skill level in whatever their idiosyncratic or generic just pursuit and endeavor is, and just have appreciation for that in and of itself with a significantly less emphasis on the periphery of the tangible material assets that type of success could like yield. So
Hormozy, on an episode that I did with him a couple of weeks ago, said far more people are kept poor and stupid by their ego than get rich off it. Yeah. And, he made this great point that if you are somebody that considers yourself to be a high performer, that is pushing and always trying to grow, and you're able to retain your ego, it's because you're in the wrong room. Mm-hmm. And his point was, even though he's now worth 100 mil, he's got this acquisition.com, he's doing these massive deals, he is permanently in rooms where he is both the stupidest and poorest person in the room. How can you allow an ego to proliferate and grow when you're permanently the lowest rung of the ladder? Mm-hmm. And his argument was basically that ego comes from people artificially walling off the size of the pond that they get into, mm-hmm. to allow themselves to always be the biggest fish.
But also I feel like it comes down to their deepest, most fundamental motivation. Because, for example, you could take someone like Alex. He desperately is wired to do something and wants to do something, just like work, build his empire, business, whatever. That's like his sort of thing. So he simply needs to do that to be satiated, happy, and like satisfied, right? So that's just what he's on. And in order to be able to do that as effectively as he possibly can manage, that would necessitate and require a very high level of like self-awareness. And obviously self-awareness is the antithesis to ego. So that's just simply what he wants to do. And then you could take someone else that is like the small pawn, like ego situation. Their primary, most fundamental desire isn't doing something for its own sake or any, deeper reason like that. It's simply towards the growth and maintenance of the ego, right? And that's just simply that's just what their motivation is. Like they're more interested in like having a certain self-image of themselves and doing everything to convince other people of that image and convince themselves of that image, because to them that's more important than other things. So it's just a different hierarchy of like priorities, right? So like, yes, the lower level development psyche is going to want to favor just egotistical-ish types of things.
How do you square this circle with the person that's listening to this and going, hang on, you're David fucking Lade? Like you're Mr. Instagram, Ziz era. Like, how have you made that change? How have you made that transition from being somebody who outwardly it seemed like it was, and you mentioned yourself, it was to satiate your feelings of insufficiency, to now get to a place where, I mean, how many videos have you posted on YouTube in the last year? Probably less than 12? How many Instagram posts have you done in the last year? Less than 20?
It's been at a decline.
But my point being that from where I can see, and I didn't get to hear you on podcasts before, I think that your trajectory in terms of how you're sounding to me, in terms of the things that you're thinking about, is fucking phenomenal. I would have happily taken the sabbatical from social media if what it's resulted in is you being like this. But how do you get to that point? There are guys on the internet that are watching the ego lifter, the materialist Ferrari driver, the Richard Mille red Louboutins bottom table at Club Live in Miami. What is it that can drag those people out of that? Or what would you say to those like young guys if you could? Why should they be bothered about this thing which seems hard and difficult and nuanced and no one gives a fuck about except for their own sense of existential self-worth?
I think a lot of those people that like operate like that, like they have like a vague understanding that like maybe the way in which they're operating from a lot of other people's points of view is like seen as like negative, egotistical, immature, like etc. So they have like that like general like awareness, and they're maybe aware that they to satisfy, you know, society at a whole's, you know, expectations of them, they would maybe like cease or halt or like slow down on some of that behavior or like, you know, outgrow it or etc. But they're like aware of that, but they just don't want to do it, because going back to what I was saying before, that's just simply like they're just more interested in doing that. That's like where the current level of like their development is. So in the same way, like to me, the way that I outgrew whatever, like I outgrew like whatever time, like it came from just organic like introspection. So going back to kind of what I was like saying in the beginning, like you just simply, you need to just examine, you just need to just like look at what you're doing and just like look at how you're living and look at how you're operating and just like dissect it as much as you can and be honest with yourself, obviously, and like look at it. And I feel like if you're genuinely and sincerely doing that, right, you're more than likely to realize how that pattern, that style of like living is just disadvantageous for your absolute best interest. And through coming to that realization, you just organically stop doing that. You don't have to do different things. Yeah, you don't have to discipline yourself to stop doing it. Like, oh, I really want to do it, but I want to go to this, but I can't. Like, no, you just won't have that desire. And that's the best place to be at. Because why do you want to, like, it's just where you got to arrive, you know?